Okay, so what we're going to do first is open up Unity. So in that, don't worry too much about downloading that if you can get a chance to first. So find Unity on your computer. If you don't know where it is, you can just search it. If you're on a Mac, you can just hit Command Shift Spacebar or Alt Spacebar, and then you can type in what you're looking for. And if you're on a PC, you can just select the bottom and start typing in Unity. Here we are. I have it on my desktop too. It's this weird box with the white edges. And once you open it, you're going to get to the project window. So this is, as you set up, you're going to want to build separate projects for what you're building. Inside projects are scenes, so if you are making separate parts of the same project, you can build separate scenes out. But overall, there's big projects. As long as you're running 5.6 or greater right now, that'll work for what we're doing. But I think they sent out 2017.2 last night. So 2017.2 is the version of Unity. It just means there's different, they add more stuff each version. They update it. It's nice because they keep up to date with all the types of VR headsets out there. So this version added the first part of the Microsoft new ones, the mixed reality headsets that do that inside-out tracking we talked about last week. But really that's 2017.3. So we're going to create our new project. So just you'll see in the top right, there's this new option. And so if you hit new up there, it's going to pop into this screen right here. If you haven't, you may have another thing that pops up on your screen that says you need to sign in. You just need to make an account. It's free. There's nothing you have to pay. Don't pay for the pro license. You don't need to do that unless you're earning above $100,000 a year on whatever you're making. So don't worry too much about it. So all you need to do is just select that new option, and you can name your project whatever you want. I'm going to call this 360 video. For now, you'll see there's like these 3D option, 2D option. Is anybody not getting to this point before we go on? This is way easier than talking sometimes online. So 3D and then add asset package. You can just skip those. We just want to make sure you have 3D selected. You can change this later if you miss this point. Don't worry. You can turn on or off the analytics. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to be Yvonne today, but yours will say whatever your name is down here. So I'm going to save it to my documents for now. You can figure it out later, Yvonne. I'm going to create this project. So should I create project? And they'll see it'll take a few seconds because now it's going to build out the libraries, set up the project, and there's a lot of windows here, but I promise you it's less scary than it looks.
And I always find that when it sort of disappears on me, I'm like, oh, I better start it again. I'm like, I restart too many Unity. It does take a little patience.
So it'll take a few moments for you to boot up. Hopefully, yours will look a little different than this. Do you mind if I go to the default layout?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So I'm just going to make it look like yours does. Layouts, default. So this is probably what yours will look like when you first log in. And so on the far right, yours is going to say services instead. So I'll open that Windows, the services window too, actually, so we can all see it. So on the far right, yours will look essentially like this, probably, after logging in. Does anyone's not look like this? All right, good start. Good start.
I'm still, sorry, mine's sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry. You're in the default layout. Once you're inside, you're right. Unity takes a little bit to boot up on older computers, but once you're inside, it runs pretty well. You what? Sorry?
The services?
If you don't have that, you don't need it. I'm going to close it. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. By default, Unity shows you the services part, but we don't need that. It's just there. I just want to close it in a second.
Yeah, I'm always
Oh, okay.
Sorry, where were the services?
So services on the far right. We don't need it. You don't need that. If it's closed, don't worry. That's good. We're going to close the services. I just want to make sure everyone, if you see this, don't panic.
And it does, I feel like this is a lot going on when I look at this. But Jason makes it straightforward.
I promise you that this looks like a lot, but in the end, it's quite easy to use. Okay, so everyone's at this point. We're going to now start making things. So I'm going to close this services tab right here. So I have services. If you don't have services, don't worry. I'm just closing it. So I can right click on the top little tab part and hit close tab. And you'll see now there's like 4 windows here, 4 big windows. On the far left up here, we have the hierarchy. It's called the hierarchy. And then in the middle, we have the scene view. On the far right, we have the inspector. And this bottom one down here is our project window. The project window is basically like the folder explorer. So whenever we go into our folders and look through our folders, it's kind of the same idea. So you can kind of write this off as just being the folders. And if you really want to see it is the folders on the drive, you can right click on the assets, you show an explorer, and you'll see it's taking you to the folders. And anything I add here, let's say I add a new folder here, you don't have to follow along, you can just observe that it happens. All right, this is a new folder. You'll see that in Unity, that folder will just pop up. So this is just a window into your drive. You don't need to worry about this too much. You're going to add things in here later that you can use. And this is where we're going to put that shader that I sent you before. Now the other part, this part up here in the hierarchy, this left side over here, right now you may see more. You can expand it. This is what's called the scene. So your scene is made up of a bunch of game objects. These are the parts of whatever you're making. When you want to add something, it goes into this scene view up here. So if I want to add an object, let's all add an object right now. If you right click in the hierarchy, you can do 3D object. So right click in the hierarchy. If you're on a Mac and it's a little bit more difficult, you can just take game object at the top. And then you'll see an option that says 3D object. Or control, yeah, or command, yeah, there's a bunch of different shortcuts for it.
And then which object do we add?
You can select whatever you want. There's cubes, spheres. These are what are called primitive objects. They're basic shapes so that you can use freely as you desire. So we'll start with a cube, and later we're going to put a sphere in. So I'm going to put a cube in, and you'll see right in front of you in your scene, a cube should appear.
Oh, you can do that. Because you control it.
Yeah.
And the cube will have a bunch of parts to it.
It's a tree.
Okay, of all the things.
It's like, what is the first thing that people pick?
A tree.
That's cool. Okay, I'll do a tree too then. The one problem with the tree is that it has a little bit of a different functionality. Oops, not a win zone. So the one problem there's a slight problem with a tree in that it has its own functionality.
It has its own, what's that?
It has its own functionality. It's a little bit more complicated.
Okay, you picked the most complicated thing you could possibly put in your seed.
You can.
Awesome.
So if you select a tree, you'll see this on the far right. There's a bunch of stuff here. But let's, if you did create a tree, let's also create a cube, just because this part's going to be easier if you have a cube. So to make a cube, you can go game object, 3D object, cube. It'll pop up. And you'll see right now it'll probably be at the base of your tree.
Are you having trouble?
It moved?
Oh yeah, it changed your view.
Okay, so if you press up here, you'll see that you can actually just, so maybe we'll do this part next. If you have an object, don't worry about adding a cube if you have a tree. If you look around your scene, so your scene view you can explore and make changes to. So if you right click in your scene, you can look around in your scene. And if you scroll in and out with the mouse button, or if you hold Alt and right click, you can zoom in and out. You can zoom it out with the mouse wheel. You can pan by hitting this little hand up here in the top left corner. And you can pan around the scene.
It's a little tiny hand.
Up in the top left. If you have a mouse, you can also just press down with the middle mouse button to move around. I don't have a mouse, an extra mouse here, unfortunately.
But it's true.
Okay, I'll do all the computer shortcuts instead.
Is there a button where it can just scroll where it was? If I fight around so much.
If you guys end up looking all over the place and you want to find your way back to an object, you can double. So look in the hierarchy and you see my cube. If I double click on it, it'll take me to that cube.
Wow.
So if I double click on the directional light, you'll see it'll take me to the directional light and it'll move mine out of the way. But I'm gonna stick to my cube. So right away you can see I have my cube. You guys might have your tree. That's cool. I'll manipulate both. So the cube and the tree that I have here, you guys can have the tree or a cube or both. Totally up to you. We just want to learn how to play around in the space right now. So whatever you have, it doesn't matter. But if you select one, you'll see that these arrows appear. So you can either select it by going into the hierarchy and selecting cube or tree, and you'll see that these it outlines different objects. So right now it's outlining my tree. If I select my cube, it's outlining my cube, and it gives me these arrows. If you don't have these arrows, don't worry. That just means up here in the top left, you have different selection types. So you can also use your keyboard, but if you select the arrows, you'll see that these are the arrows that appear. And these arrows let you move it positionally in space. So that's unfortunate.
No,
Zapping his PRAM, right?
I think that my mouse got like the track pad done.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll catch you up. Don't worry.
You had like your emergency things going on, but now you got to that.
I know.
No, awesome. We are happy that you're out here.
So if you want to move your cube around or your tree or whatever you have, just grab it by any of the arrows and you can move it around along the axes. Or you can move it around along a plane by, you'll see inside this cube there's this little blue, red, and green. That'll let you move it along a plane. So this is like, it's pressed up against the wall on this side and then moving around on that wall. Really the easiest way to think about it is to use the axes, because you can just move those along one direction. This is kind of how our brain thinks about things. So if you're familiar, this is like graphing where we have our x and y axis, and we move something along the x-axis or the y-axis. We're just introducing the z-axis. That gives us depth. That is that third plane. 3D comes from literally that third axis, that z-axis. So that's when I move this z value back and forth, I'm allowing it to move. Now if your scene looks something like this, where it looks really flat, kind of weird like, this is what's called isometric mode, or and you'll see it doesn't look 3D quite. Now to get out of that, there's this little box in the middle of this compass rose up here. And if you hit that little box, it'll return. Alternatively, you'll see this little, hopefully you can see that little purse thing. If you click on that, it'll switch between them. So this is perspective mode. This is classic 3D we see in 3D. Just in case you hit any of these problems. But we're mostly exclusively going to hang out in perspective mode. So you can also rotate these cubes and scale them, or any kind of object you have in your scene. There's this little rotation option up here. So in the top left corner, you'll see that there's a few different options. You'll see it changes what happens to my cube. I can change the position, back and forth, up and down, and then I can select rotation, and I get this globe around my cube. This globe allows me to grab it at any point and just rotate it around if I want to. It's usually a little bit easier to grab it by the axes. Again, this is more how we think. It's like you took a pin, stuck it in the side, grab it by the axes, and you rotate it that way. So if you grab this little red axis that goes around, it'll only rotate on the x-axis no matter where I go. Then the third one, the other useful one, is this scale option. On the far right, if I click on that scale option, you'll see the cube gets these square boxes around it. And I can drag it out. I can change its shape. I can make this a floor instead of a cube, instead of a box. I can drag it from the middle and it'll scale all perspective at once, or all axes at once, or I can keep it as a cube.
Can you do that by clicking on scale?
So there's a scale option at the top. There's our rotation, transform, rotate, scale, and then the last one's also scale, but in a different way. We're going to kind of ignore the last one. It's really used for 2D elements. But if you want to, you can play around with it. It's the last one on the list. If you hit it, you'll see this box appear, and you can grab the corners of your object and scale it. Oops.
How do you zoom in and out at the same time?
So you can either roll with your mouse wheel or right click, hold Alt and right click, and then scroll back and forth.
I can't just 2 fingers.
Oh yeah, if you're on, that's right, if you're on a Mac, you can 2-finger drag in and out. It's the same as scroll wheel. So now that you kind of have a cube you can scale, take note of whenever you select one of these objects in the scene, on the far right in this other window, you're getting a bunch of details about that object. So when I select this cube, you'll see on the right there's a whole bunch of what are called components of this cube. And these components make up the cube. So they may look kind of scary right now, but components are just pieces. It's like these make up basically the root of the object is just a game object. It's an empty game object. I'll create an empty game object so you can see what it looks like. An empty game object looks like nothing. You can see it right here. It's this empty floating thing in space. On the far right, you can see in the inspector, it has a game object component where you can name it. So I'll call this maybe empty. And this is for your own sake. It doesn't translate into whatever you build in the end. It's just for you to be able to see it later. And then you'll see the big part here is that transform component. And so if you select one of these cubes, you'll notice that we've messed around with this, so the scale is all funny. But if you want to change your cube's position by numbers, which is more how I like to do it, but a lot of people like to do the drag method, you can also just change the values here. So if I change this to a 2, you'll see it moves to the 2 meters from the center point of the world. So treat these as meters. So 2 is 2 meters, 0.05 is 5 centimeters. That kind of thing will make your life easier when you get into VR because most of them are by default set up that way in Unity. So 1 meter is 1 unit. Now I'm going to reset my scale to 111. That'll make it back into the original cube shape, which is a cube that's 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter.
Yeah, there was also the little toggle at the end just has a reset button.
You are very correct. So jumping ahead, but that's great.
Sorry.
No, that's good because
Very
that.
similar to my editing software, like it.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you recognize this interface.
Wow, it's just a bit different, but they do the same things.
That's right. It's scary to look at, but I promise you a lot of these things do the same thing. So like moving around, we can move the values here. We can also go and change them in the transform. You can change the scale here. The little gearbox, you can press the gearbox, and if you hit reset, it will return it to 0, 0, 0, and 1, 1, 1, which is the default values. It'll reset to whatever the default values of that item is. So the kind of the basic components are that transform, so on this empty game object, that transform, which just holds its position in space, and then that game object, which is what notifies what it is, basically gives it its name. So I have an empty game object, cube. I'm going to clean my hierarchy up a little bit so we get down to basics a little bit more, but I'll delete my empty object. If you want to delete anything from your scene, you can just select it, and you'll see in the hierarchy it selects the object. So these three are linked, these three windows heavily. So if I select any object in my scene, like this cube, you'll see it selects the cube in my hierarchy. And on the right side, it tells me more details about that cube. So if I want to delete it, I can just right-click it in the hierarchy and hit delete, and you'll see it disappears, and it no longer is in my hierarchy. So we can play around. It's pretty straightforward to build a scene if you want to.
Is it always, when you create an object, does it always put it right in the middle?
It puts it right in the middle of wherever my camera's looking. So if I look this camera up
Oh, I see, yeah.
and create a 3D object cube, it places it above me. Good question.
You're a match.
Well, it's kind of similar, like it's kind of reminding me of like 3D animation.
It's very similar, yeah.
I wondered if it's all about targeting a view, so that makes sense to me. I was just making sure they're all not going to be piled in the same spot. Every time you want to kind of move your camera around so that you just keep getting your textured landscape.
Exactly, yeah. So you can move your camera around, and this is how you can position around. But when I move in this space, the scene view, this is not the game mode. This isn't what other people will see. This is how I'm interacting with creating this world.
Eventually, people will see it once we build it and coded it.
Yeah. So the difference is that we're going to enter code next week a little bit more. But for now we're going to show you that this camera over here, you'll see this little camera guy in the corner. You can look in your hierarchy, and you should have a main camera. If you don't worry. We can add one. Let me know if you don't have one. We'll add it. And this main camera is actually what the players who will see. So when you build your application and send it to a phone or send it to the Vive, this is what the player will see from. So right now you can see if I go to game mode in the top, this tab up here, so we're in our scene mode, and there's also a game mode tab up here. If I select that, this is what the camera sees. Oops, this is what the camera sees. I can't move around this camera. It has to be done and set up through code or through some kind of interaction scripts that you're creating. The nice thing about when we're creating for VR, normally our camera is controlled by our head because you don't want to grab someone's head and move them around. It's mostly controlled by our head, so we don't need to worry, especially in 360 video, about moving this camera around. We can leave it in its starting place, and it will work in VR with our rotation of our head. I don't have VR set up, so I can't just play it for you, but I will show you how to get it set up. So what we're going to do now is, if you can, just select the objects in your hierarchy that are not the camera and the light. So select the cube, I'll delete the cube. So it's just my camera and my directional light in my scene. If you have a tree, you'll see a tree on your far left. I'll add it to delete it. So there's my tree, you'll see it pop up, and it's in here. I'm just going to right click on it and select delete. Now it's just a camera and a directional light. So we're back to a simple scene. Yeah. We can build them back up later. So now we're going to introduce that shader we have, because we're going to actually create a 360 video and just use one of the basics and play around with it a bit. So to do that, grab that shader I sent you. So if you go to your email, it should be, this is the wrong one, it should be this part right here, like that link. I already have it on here. You can just find it in the folders, so show in folder, and I'll drag it into here. Downloads. So there's, all you need to do is to be able to get it into your project is to either select it and drag and drop it into the project window. The other way you can do it is if you want to find your assets folder, you can right click on your assets folder, show in Explorer, and then you can put it in your folder structure here. The other way is to just go File, Assets, Import New Asset, and then you can find it. I think it's in Downloads, and then when you find it, wherever the heck it is, this is way cleaner than my desktop. Trust me, you're in rough shape over there. Reverse image shader here. When I double click on it, it's going to import it, and you'll see it should appear with this weird like S. So it should appear as an object like this.
Oh, bring back the trees. Already.
Oh, I have my trees in my screen here. So the trees in here are actually now creation trees. We're gonna skip those guys for now. So did yours work? Did it import?
Oh, I just don't know where it went after I downloaded.
Oh, that's all right. We can
just do a
find it.
search.
So if you've got that, then download a 360 video now. It shouldn't take long. They're all pretty short, and you can get a lower version. And that's in that second list I sent you.
What should I import it as?
So here I'll download one, and then you can see what it looks like. What's the cool one? I like this one. I can download this. I think there's a download here. So when you get this download option, you'll see there's tons of options. We don't want to download it too high res because it takes a while to download. So I'm probably going to do it at 1920 is 1080p. That's actually pretty small, but yeah, I guess we'll have to do it that way. All right, I'm going to do it even lower res than that. No, I'll do 1920 by 960. So it's going to take a second to download. Okay, internet's really fast here, so it's not that big a deal.
Oh, because I was looking at it.
I think we have fiber here, if I recall correctly.
I think it has to be.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Oh no, I'm sure that's
That's
not
nice.
I know, exactly. It's good to know. Actually, the whole building,
Yeah. They have a huge render farm in the other building, which is like for video games and for movies. They render. There's a server section over there where they just send all the stuff from LA, and there's a pipeline from LA to the render farm over there.
in the building right across the
yeah.
way? Oh.
You'll see the server guys walking in and out of that building all the time. It has to be kept extra cold because the servers run so hot. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
The one wearing a carpet.
So we got the shader now.
You got the shader? Awesome. Now you want to download a 360 video. So it's the second link in that list of emails. So you can select any video you want. Totally cool.
How do I import the shader? Like, do I use
Yeah. Close it.
The shader or the
yeah, the shader. I'm at like import package.
okay, so instead of import package, hit assets, import new asset instead of import package. So just above it. And then when you see that, you can find the shader in your list of shaders. And I'm actually going to import, it's in the same place as my video, so I can import my video the same way. So just hit import asset, find your video, and select that.
Oh, there you have it.
Oh.
Do you have the shader? Do you have a video too? Cool. Okay,
Oh.
well, you guys write that. I'm just going to write quickly a script.
And my roommate isn't
And this download
doesn't require so much speed and stuff in internet. And then this summer I was trying to upload a file, and this day that he happened to be there.
You don't have to do this step. Don't have to do this step. I'm just doing something quickly. Making sure everyone's on the same page.
How do you import the video again?
So to import this video, same way as you imported the shader, go into Assets, or you can click on the Create. Oops, I'm taking a second here. Give me a half second.
What size should we do?
It's up to you. Just look at the size on the side. It downloaded 60 megs pretty quickly, so anything around that size is good.
69.
We're not going to dive into code today. I'm just going to make a quick script so it makes everyone a little bit easier for us to look at the video.
I automatically go for the highest resolution.
It's pretty high.
Oh, right.
If you
Didn't
just
scroll
put
down.
60 would be fast.
Right.
Like, it's automatically go for the highest.
Automatically 4K.
So, if you watch closely, this is definitely code.
So we're not going to jump directly into code. I'm just making something for.
Ignore that behind her.
I'm just going to make something quickly for us to be able to do this.
I mean, obviously, like, it's not something you're following right now, but, you know, I mean, so you get put into another window and you're typing something down.
And all this is, like you can see, I'm going to put in basically two variables. There's going to be two lines of code and one variable. And all this is going to do is so that we can move our camera with our mouse while we're playing. Just a simple thing to be able to look around in a 360 video, because we're not in VR yet, so our head's not going to be moving around at all, unfortunately. So we're just going to have to rely on a few little pieces. Yep.
I have a couple of questions about the difference between C# and C++, and Unreal versus Unity and that kind of stuff.
Do we want to hit that stuff? Okay. No, we're not. We can hit up a few things.
Yeah, you're right.
That's what they call it, rotation speed. So does everyone have a video yet?
Yes.
Video and shader? Okay, then I'll continue and I'll come back to this. So for the video and the shader, all we want to do is we're going to make a sphere in our world, and we're going to use those two components so that sphere is surrounding our video. So that will become our spherical video. So to do that, I'm going to find my main camera. Here it is in my scene. And I can, near my camera, I want to place that sphere. So I'm going to go right click and create a 3D object, a sphere. Now, if they end up far apart from each other, which may happen, your sphere ends up way over here if you're looking in the wrong direction. That's totally cool, because all you need to do is select your camera and zero it out. So if you zero out the position, X, Y, and Z, and then select your sphere and set it to 0, 0, 0, then they'll be in the same place, because that's all in world space. The one thing to note, though, before, just in case they're overlapped, if you place the sphere inside your main camera, it's kind of like it becomes a component of it. So just try and make sure there's no little arrows next to any of the objects in your scene.
Yeah. Oh.
And if they are, just grab the object that's underneath and drag it out. We're not getting on to child and parenting yet. So once you have that, if you don't have it, don't worry yet. We're just going to add a sphere, but we need to create some kind of texture for the sphere. So all of our objects right now have been white. It's pretty plain, pretty boring, but we can add textures to them and create kind of reactions. So I'm going to right-click in my assets folder and just create what's called a material. So in my assets folder, that's the project window on the bottom. I'm going to right-click, or I can go to the create tag up here. Or, and again, this is how many times you has duplicates of menus. You can also just go to assets and select create as well. There's lots of different ways you can create this. And all you want to do is find that, so assets, create, and you'll see this material down here. If you select that, you'll see a new little object appear inside your project window. So it's this little new material, and it'll show up on the right side of the inspector. So this is, if we want to, we'll call this, I'll call this 360 video material. You can call it whatever you want. The name doesn't actually mean anything. It's just there for your own sake. And what you can do is you'll notice there's this color up here. I'm just going to change this to see what it looks like. You can change this next to albedo if you have it selected. Make sure you have it selected in your project window. Next to albedo, there's this color white. You can change it to any color you desire. And once you do that, you can drag and drop it on your sphere, and you'll notice that your sphere will change color too. There we go. We have a change color sphere. Purple world. So what we've done here is just change the surface texture of it. But this isn't going to work quite yet. We're almost there, though. Don't worry. Okay, so if that didn't happen for you, don't worry. I'll undo this, and I'll show you what it looks like. The way I can do this, if I drag this object onto my sphere, it'll go purple. The other way I can do this, because sometimes there's blocking objects in the way, is if I select the object, you can look at the mesh renderer part of it, component. This is the part that's actually doing the showing of the image. You don't need to worry too much about it. So select the sphere. You can do that in the hierarchy or in the scene. And once you do that, you should see on the right side in the inspector a bunch of components. One of those should be the mesh renderer. If your material didn't take, it didn't go on top of it, then you just select the materials option inside there, and it'll open up, and you'll see right now it's set to default material. If it's set to default material, you can just drag your material in there. So if I drag my 360 video material over to that and drop it, so you see I grabbed it from my project window, dragged it over to my element 0, dropped it there, and it will replace the material and change the color on the sphere. And that material that we used, if you ever wanted to make your own 2D art or anything along those lines, those materials take textures. So the normal textures you get out of Photoshop, out of Paint, whatever you're creating, those will just wrap around whatever object it is, depending on the way it's wrapped. So we have this 360 video material. You'll see it's created purple for me. We're ultimately not going to use the purple ball, although it does kind of look cool. We're going to change this to now it displays 360 video. And to do that, we're going to select our 360 video option, or material, or whatever your material is called. Once you've added it, it'll keep the link between the two. So when I change it here, it'll change it on the ball. So I can change this shader up at the top, you'll see. We want to change that to, what did I call that thing? Let me just see what it's called. It's called custom. Okay. So you'll see shader, custom, and then reverse faces. And once you do that, it's going to suddenly look weird. It looks flat, like the light's not covering it. It's just a flat, reflectionless object. And the reason for that is because it's actually, if you go inside of it, it's also still seeable. It's hard to see for me, but it's become not using light, which you don't really want in your movies, because it'd be kind of like you're in a cinema where you see the light cast on the screen as opposed to actually being in the movie. It's a different effect. So now it's taking the effect of the lights off of it, and reversing what's called the faces of it, so we can see the sphere from the inside out as opposed to the outside in. Now, what we want to do to our object now is just select our sphere, and we're going to add the video component to this. So we're going to add our first component to an object. So on the bottom, you'll see this add component option. So if you select your sphere in the scene, somewhere you'll see on the right side of the inspector, there's add component. If you press add component, you just want to write player, and you'll see there's a video player option. And next week we're going to get into the director stuff, but for this week we're doing the player. So if you select video player, you'll see it adds this new box inside of our sphere. And this is handling all the video that we put in. So if you didn't get that, just hit add component and type player, and you'll see video player pop up. And now we're almost there. The last thing we need to do is drag that video that we have in our assets folder, wherever you have your video. You'll see on your video player there's a video clip option, and it says none video. Just drag and drop that over there to the video option. Let me just make sure. So now it's set up to be attached to my camera on the side. There's one more thing I'm going to do, and I do suggest you do as well, is you increase the scale of your sphere. So I'm going to increase the scale of my sphere to be about 10, because otherwise it's just wrapped a meter around me. But if it's 10, then it's much larger. So by default, the video player is set to play on awake, but just make sure that tick box is checked. And that our wait for first frame, you can ignore that. All this stuff doesn't matter for us. But you probably want it to loop too. So if you hit loop, you can tick that. So now we just want to make sure our camera is in the very middle of the sphere. It looks to me like it's in the middle. You can tell because if it's at the 0, 0, 0 position and the sphere is also at the 0, 0, 0 position, then they are at the exact same point. The center point of the sphere is at where the camera is. And while you're developing whatever you're making, you can test it and run it. And to do that, all you have to do is hit this play button at the top. So if I press play now,
Sorry, mine turns purple. Yours won't turn purple.
yours won't turn purple, yours will turn light gray. Yeah.
But it's just to let you know that you're playing instead of editing the scene. I needed something to show me.
So right now you can't look anywhere except for straight forward. But if I look in my scene mode, I can actually rotate my camera, and you'll see in this preview here. Actually, I'll move my game down here. If I rotate, don't do what I just did. That's some big stuff.
No,
okay.
no.
Yeah, okay. I just want to show you that if I rotate and look around, I can now see the whole world. Oops, that's a weird rotation. I can look around this 360 video. I'll do it. So this 360 video, even at a low resolution, it still looks pretty good. If you have sound, it'll actually play the sound too. So if yours is in the rainy forest, I'm going to move it back up to where the same setup you guys have. I'm just going to finish writing the script briefly. I may as well show you what the code looks like so you can see what it looks like for next week. So I'm just going to write a little script so that when we're playing, we can move our mouse around to look at the scene instead of it's stuck. Because by default, the camera will just stay looking in the direction it's looking. So does anybody's video not show up first? Okay, so select the game view. Okay, I see. So, oh, sorry, hit play again. I see what's wrong. So the sphere, drag the sphere out of there. So it's a child of the main camera. You don't want it to be a child. So just drag it down, drop it. There you go. And set the position from 0 to 0, 0, 0. Excellent. And maybe increase the scale to like 10. Pardon me. Awesome. Okay, the other thing is if you make changes while you're in play mode, they do not take effect. They're not permanent. Sorry, I should have said that. And the last one is select the main camera and do the same. Except for don't increase the size. Instead, there you go. Now try pressing play. There you go. We can't move the camera yet. Oh, do you enter you inside and you're just looking at the sphere?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna send you a script to do it. I'm just gonna show you guys the picture of what it's like. Yeah.
It's so funny because you got
And maybe go to sphere.
So I think I put
And 0, 0, 0, and 0.
my video
Go to camera.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Position 0, 0.
So this right here is a circle compared to so it should be what's called a sphere.
oh, I didn't notice that yet.
Apologies for my.
No, he said
Okay, why don't I
change
give you
that
the
zero.
mouse?
And
Oh yeah, I'll take it.
game.
Oh yeah. I know I never put it on either, but now I'm realizing in Unity it's very nice to have a
Oh,
little.
it was in plain mode music.
Oh, we're ready. Oh, so it went back.
No, I've never done.
Yeah.
Oh, my computer's getting so hot. It's really working.
The clothes almost everything down.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If you're in the nursery, that means all changes.
Okay.
I can just use regular.
So yeah, so that's a circle and you want to right behind.
I know.
It's true. Well, look at
And then
Maybe
aim
it's
object
just
down
really
down there.
bad.
you can get like a panorama.
You just go to about
But
this
you're
map
right,
and
it
see
would
if
be
your
to get
graphic card is engaged.
So now we just want to drag that.
Apple?
Or just,
ten all across the board.
But there is a 360 camera here. I just wasn't fast enough. Phone was dog like around here. So, but next week we can have.
And the last thing you want to make sure is
We'll come early.
So it's the
You see
Intel.
that position right now, anti H, so I want that 0.
Even if the programs on it.
Perfect. And then
Yep.
Yeah, I've got Chrome. You guys are very,
right.
I go on time with Jason in his class. We're all lost. You guys are just like, yep, got it.
Oh, word.
last piece
I
is
can't
you
do
see right
what
now
he
the camera
did.
sees nothing yet because the material on that sphere is that right now it's just showing us.
Okay.
So did you get the shader?
Oh, it was just.
Okay, so
So
then,
you tap it.
the main camera is good 0, 0, 1, 1, 1.
And then it should probably be your
So this is, yeah, it was moving before.
Might be just thinking, hey?
Oh, but you have video clip, you have none there.
Oh.
And under my video
Let's stop it and start it again.
Sure. Oh, sorry.
So look at
the sphere, you press on the sphere. Okay, yeah, you're gonna grab your video image. And put it where it says more video.
Oh, there. Oh, thank you. I know he was moving along and I was.
I know, he's on silver. I see now.
Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah.
Go try it.
you check your
That makes sense. I didn't know video. I can hear it.
Do you try your.
that's the video.
Oh, but you don't have. Oh yeah, you're supposed to go.
Oh, it's down here.
Yeah,
Oh,
the default. I think you need to add components.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure it's just one step.
Yes. Okay, let's see. So I guess maybe do we want it doesn't I don't think it matters.
I mean, I got the video.
Oh, it's up here. You have that. Okay. Put that. Oops. Oh,
So you've got your 360 video as your platform.
So now
you
we
have to
created
custom reverse 360.
Right, why wouldn't it let me?
Oh, that was.
If I play his play, and I'm gonna go into the game view. Oh wait a minute, I can't move around in this either. Well,
And that's gonna be what.
So he wrote a little thing.
You probably should, like,
'cause- so we haven't got the script yet for moving.
Yeah.
Let's see, video player.
last step is just where's the standard up there? Yep. We'll change that to custom, which is
And then he took it. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll just drag that onto the sphere.
I know you did name it.
We're just not able to do it because there's no script on there. But can we? Thinking.
And then you want to
It's
add
all
your
grayed
own
out.
object
I just got this email from
and
Devin.
write
You know
sorry,
Devin?
video. So,
That's fine.
or you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know Devin?
Yeah, he just sent this about the 5 questionnaire.
Right.
You got it?
Yeah, from Dave.
Okay, then.
That is great.
Oh, great. Yeah, and that's what it's supposed to be.
Weren't they doing
It
the...
may take more than 5 minutes. Just so you
That's
know.
what I'm
Well, that's it. I remember we had the discussion about
Beautiful.
should we say it's 5?
If it's gone back to that.
They're gonna do
So we're gonna make
a
enough so you
women
can,
in tech
you can do,
type thing for
you can look around.
what was it? It's like humans in New York, but women in tech. That's a cool idea. Did you have anything to do with that idea?
Oh, I see.
Never have any creative. Is everybody doing it? You guys got it going on?
Isn't it amazing?
Oh, that looks
Yeah.
good.
Okay, so
Yes, we're not moving around yet. He demoed how to do it, but as Emily said. Okay. What he was doing though, I think, was if you can see, if you, I don't want to mess you up. Okay, stop playing. Now you were showing how you could rotate the view. Is that right?
Oh
Were you
yeah.
doing
Okay.
that?
So
So sorry.
I'm gonna rotate the view. I'm gonna write a little script to do that right now.
Okay.
So this is gonna give you a chance to peek into the coding world of VR. It's all you can think about it. It's something you can think about in steps. So I'm gonna show you what it looks like here. I'm just writing a script called camera movement. And if I open it up, I'm gonna attach this script to my camera. So I'll do that first. So to do that, I can hit add component, and I'm gonna add this camera movement. You guys can't do this, just follow along. Okay. I'm writing this on as I go. So camera move, I've written this script. So script is just a component, just like that video player, just like the part that's showing all the sphere. And now I'm gonna open up this camera move. So I just do that by double clicking on it, and it's gonna open up Visual Studio. Visual Studio is just a place to type code, basically. It helps you with making code. It gives you some features and things to hand out. And at the top, what I'm doing is setting what's called a variable. This is something I can change if I want to from object to object that I can use to, like, say, change my speed of how quickly I'm rotating. Or I could use it to say how far I'm moving if I'm moving something. The next part I'm doing is what's called the update loop. And this is more intuitive for filmmakers than it is for a lot of people approaching this. And the reason of that is this is your frames per second. It's happening per frame. So every frame, the update loop happens. So when you play a video, you have, normally when you're playing a movie, you do image, followed by image, followed by image, followed by image. And they're just really static images that make motion through movement, or through the speed at which they're playing to make it appear like there's motion. But it's just static images. Computers are doing the same thing, but between each image, they're doing calculations for what the next image will look like. And so that happens in this update loop. So it runs through the code in the update loop, then it shows a picture, and then it runs through the code in the update loop, and then it shows a picture, and just continues to do this. So it's a cycle where it's running through the update loop, running the set of commands, which are things like move this object here. Then it'll render what that object looks like on the screen. And then it'll go back in the update loop and say move the object this much further. Then it'll show it up in the render screen, which is showing it as a picture. and then it'll continue that process and cycle all the way down. So all I'm doing here in this update loop is the first time I'm making up a rotation speed. So this is how quickly I can rotate. The second part, all I'm doing is I'm telling whatever object this script is attached to, so whatever, in my case, this is the camera. So I've selected the camera and I've added this object to the camera, this camera move script. Whatever object I'm attached to, I'm going to start rotating it based on where my mouse has moved. So to do that, all I'm going to say in the update loop is this transform, and when you remember when I said before we were dealing with the transform, we were changing the position. So in Unity, that transform component up here that we see, this is how we're changing the values of where we're moving. So if I change the Y value, it changes the position of the camera. You can see it moving up and down. Well, all I'm going to do is grab that rotation so that it changes the rotation. You see the camera rotating instead this time, spinning around. Or the x-axis, you'll see it looks up and down. To say depending on which way my mouse is moving, rotate the camera. So I'm actually just going to say, oops. And the nice part is Unity does a lot of this work for us. So we're going to say, based off of the pivot up. So this is like when if you took a pin, stuck it in something, and then you try to spin it, it would spin around that pin. So I'm saying up. So this is the direction up. So it's pinned in, and I can rotate around that point. So based on the angle. So my angle will be rotation speed. And don't worry too much about time.delta time. That is the time between each frame it takes to do all the calculations. It's basically saying rotate this much per second, as opposed to something like rotate this amount. Because sometimes it takes longer to make a frame than other times. So it's just a way of smoothing out any issues. And then I'm going to get my input, or input.get axis. And these are a lot of big things you don't need to worry about just a second.
Well, we're talking about Chelsea's fine now for tonight.
So that is essentially one line of code. Oops, it's throwing me an error. Oh, they want to use rotate. Okay. So this is essentially the one line. This one line of code, and all it's doing is taking the movement on my mouse. Based on the movement on my mouse, is rotating that camera object. I'm going to do one more line because this is just along one axis, and now I want to do the other axis as well, so I can do up and down. So to do that, it's literally the same line, but I'm just changing the axis it's on and which input I'm using. So transform.rotate.
You can see that there's a lot of suggestions for what he filled in as
I love it.
which is really nice.
It makes my, yeah.
Especially so you don't get too many typos. In the old days, we didn't have that. Just
Yeah.
so you know that.
This is what's called an IDE, and an IDE makes your life a lot easier. An interactive developer environment, it helps you with your code as you're writing. So you know whether you're writing the right thing or whether you've made a mistake. It'll show you. You can see the red underline right now because I'm finished, and it's saying I'm missing pieces.
Yeah, it's very color visual.
And you can make it your own.
It's different. It's being like even from back here, it's like I can't really read it, but I can see where you're adding your brackets.
And that makes those colors mean things, and they become kind of more easy to understand over time. So if I go back into Unity now and press play, oops, I cannot move left and right because I don't think I saved it. Nope, I did save it. What did I miss?
Yeah. There's a tiny little app that shows up that hasn't been saved, and I lost all that.
Okay, that looks wonderful. Okay, there's one more thing. Don't worry about this part. This is just a separate thing. I have to make sure it's spelled correctly. Horizontal, vertical. Perfect. Okay. Oh, still doesn't like mine. Okay. It's because I'm not using mouse input. So I use my keyboard. But so I can set up to look around my keyboard now. I'm going to change it so it's my mouse input. Okay, what is it called? I got the wrong name. Oh, mouse X and mouse Y. That probably should have been pretty evident. Mouse X and mouse Y. So there we go. I have it reversed, but it's rotating now, and I'll probably up the speed. So I'll send you guys the script so you can also look around and change what's happening. But I'm also going to change the speed because it's hecka slow. All right, so I'm going to up the speed, and let's make it look a little bit more. So that variable I set, I can now change inside the code, and now I rotate much faster. Oops, I'm rotating along the wrong axis. It should have been transform up and forward.
Now, so installing Visual Studio is another step.
It comes with Unity.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't like my
So
horizontal
and there's two development environments that you'll hear about, Visual Studio and MonoDevelop. The Visual Studio, MonoDevelop is fine, just get set up.
MonoDevelop will be what's on your, if you're on a Mac, you'll get MonoDevelop, and it does the same thing. It's just another IDE that helps you fill things out and miss parts. But we're not going to add too much code, but I'll send everyone this one right now so you can kind of see what it looks like. Unity does most of the work for when you set up a code initially. Oops, this is the wrong section. This is a lot harder with a mouse, so you kind of forget it.
Yeah.
Oops. Actually, the other way.
I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to try the VR example in the next room that Emily helped write, but we could use it next week just to get a, well, if you guys are going to use the vibe, it is new for anybody. We'll get a little time in there just so that you get exposure to it. Like we could just.
We should find a computer that's on it. Oh, it's in private.
There, we just have to find it.
Yeah, well, back in my room.
We can download older versions of Unity onto that one.
Yeah, I'm
So we can do that.
all of that, for sure. And I saw you had a master's thing when you opened up Unity.
Yes, I did. I took that off the repo. There was a master that JJ put up.
Yeah, that one will do because I've just been using my mom's play, so this is nice, older one, so they get thinking of the concept of that. We just have to make sure we're connected to Steam. Plug in the Vive.
You should all have that. I just sent out that script, by the way, so you should all be able to get it now. So you can look around your video. And so once you get it, all you have to do is the same way we've done before, just download it. And then once you've downloaded it, find it. And you can go to assets, and the same way we've done before, import new asset, then find it again. And then once you find it, just select it. I already have it downloaded, and import it, and you'll see it appear like the C# script right here. Got it? All you have to do once you've got it is select the camera, and you can either drag and drop it onto the camera in the components, or you can just hit add component and write camera move. So make sure you have the camera selected to do that. If you do it on the sphere, it would kind of work. The sphere would spin around you staying still. So it'd be reversed probably what you expect.
So it's I've imported it and
Oh, it's actually reversed of what I expect right now.
oh, okay.
There's still a little bit of a glitch in it.
And I'm just and then you drag it in. Oh, right. Sorry, I did it twice.
How do I move after I put the script in?
After you put the
Oh,
script in,
right, the same
you
thing.
just press play.
Sorry.
So if you, oh, sorry, you put the script in the assets folder or on the object?
Oh, sorry.
On the camera. So yeah, if you put it on the camera, you can change the rotation speed if you want. Right now it's at 180, I think, for whatever. Or no, it's at 20. You probably want to change yours. I changed mine to 180. And then press play, and you should be able to, if you aren't moving,
Because we have Max.
if you aren't moving, click on this. Make sure you click on the game window, and then start trying it. Because if you
Purple,
Moving.
I'm in the game window. Or, well, not
Okay.
necessarily,
Oh,
but I'm just
playing.
saying.
Ooh. I didn't
you
know.
probably want to change your speed. Mine's it's really slow.
It's so little. Oh, yeah, next one. Go. It doesn't make that bigger. If you
Yeah.
want it.
So yours will be slower than mine because it's by default 20. I changed mine to 180. Change it to 180 in the so if you so if yours is really slow, select your main camera and you'll see this rotation speed on the object. Change it to 180, press enter, and then look around. Yeah.
Oh,
You can up it as high as you want.
Do they have to stop playing or it?
It should update on during running. But if you do change it while you're running, it will not update when you stop it and play it again. So you may want to do it in non-play mode anyway.
yeah. Oh,
Okay,
there we go.
so let's try that again. So I'm moving this over here.
So
Maybe
is there a place where you can go and just copy and paste coding?
Yep, there are lots of places you can do that. Absolutely.
That's another way to do it. Excellent.
Okay, yeah, for a particular move, I
Oh, it's so
look at
I
it.
feel like that's not.
I have all these funny colors.
Is that because of the shader?
The tree textures?
Funny colors? Is that what you said?
Yeah, see all these like
videos.
weird dots of color?
Oh,
where are we?
It might be artifacts in the
Oh my
video.
gosh.
Oh, I'm in this. Oh.
Oh yeah, that looks like artifacts.
You moved a tiny bit and then stopped.
You did it slightly
Is
wrong.
there- It is just too. No. Okay. What's your speed?
180.
180.
What's
We've
yours?
got. It's 180, but it's not. It's like.
Oh, exciting.
It did move. Oh.
Baby stickers.
Was it 2 fingers?
Maybe maybe these colors.
Okay, the other thing is you don't want to click outside.
Oh.
You have to click back on the game window. That's why.
Yeah.
I know. Maybe I can see the outside.
How do I go 180 then if I don't go outside the window?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, you gotta go
Okay.
outside the window.
Press play.
Oh, cool.
So you see the sphere right now? It's actually what's called a child sphere. But
Yeah.
So you want to drag that sphere outside. And I would increase the size of the sphere to maybe 10 mil.
So, like all of them?
Yeah, all across.
And changing because it used to be just that you, you could tab it, and now it's
Yeah,
changed.
not press play. Really slow though, so you can do it.
Oh, no.
Oh, very nice.
Okay, the axis is totally the same setup.
Ah, what is this?
Oh, yeah. You are flipping all over that scene.
I know.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the only thing is the way the axis is rotating. For some reason, it's getting a different axis value. Rotation speed. Okay, I think that's all we really have. What time? I think 8:30. We kind of went over a little bit.
Oh, geez.
Hopefully, no one had any appointments.
I think the packing was good because it was $3
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah,
we should
It
get
is.
one.
I think that was starting, and then it's a little bit slow, and then I think it's
So is there, I'll just save this like a timeline somewhere and just save it.
So to save, make sure you guys save. So to save, go File and then Save Scenes, and save your current scene. Call it whatever you want. So everybody, make sure you do this right now. Press your play button so you stop playing, because you don't want to be playing while you're doing this part. Make sure you're in the regular mode and hit File, Save Scenes to save your current scene, and we'll call this 360 video test or whatever you want to call it. And you'll see it pops up as that Unity symbol in your assets as a scene.
That's the Unity.
My
Yeah.
essence.
kind of like a 3D cube or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Would that look like?
That's
So
where we should
then-
put it, is in our assets?
Wherever, if you save it wherever, as long as it's inside the project file. The default place it's going to put it is in your assets, but you can make a folder if you want to separate it out. And then make sure also you go File and save your project as well, because there's project settings that are separate, and then there's the scene, which is what we're working on right now.
Something like your rotation speed to be saved.
That's part of the scene. That'll be part of the scene.
Okay, I'll start again.
All right, we've gone a little bit over time. Hopefully, no one had any prior engagements.
Wait, I think it just stopped raining out there. Oh, it was really nice and windy then raining. Yeah.
Assets. And what was the second one? Sorry, you save
Are you
as.
guys all good?
Save project. File. Save project. Yeah, you save the scenes, right? That's the most important one to save.
Yeah. Good.
Oh,
Thank
save
you for-
project.
And thank you for trying to get that thing around.
And we have to save it.
And once you're done, you can just close Unity, and you don't need it. Can there's no worries. It'll tell you if you didn't save something.
Fatal error.
Yeah,
No,
should
are
we
you
say fail
serious?
there?
Get manager from content.
You saved everything already, though, right?
I did.
Okay, you're fine.
Did it really say fatal error? You are so awesome.
How do I change? Right now it's called untitled.
Can you let them text and have it optimized?
Sure.
You can click on it in the bottom.
I think it's if it's now okay, so we can say we need to put
Oh.
Maybe
I mean, I do. This is just stuff that I've not. I've not.
it's not saving your scene, we don't think.
I've not filed.
Thanks for the mouse.
Oh, we were playing.
There you go. Now you can save it as whatever.
And I save it in assets.
Yeah, it'll, yeah, you can say wherever. Assets,
Yeah.
it'll just appear inside this one.
To the island? I mean chicken.
You guys, what a great
No.
class. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, bring it next week if you can. Remember?
Yeah.
Bring it next week if you can remember. Otherwise, you can just play around, play VR.
I don't know if you'd remember. No,
I have that.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely
felt it. It's like I went downtown and there's this beautiful Chinook wind. And
just know that these things shouldn't live on your desktop. They should live.
Thank you all. That was great. What a great session.
Should be in a document. Are you buzzing?
Oh, okay. So it's just looking around.
Yeah, like.
Oh,
it's like-
here you go. Here's one on it.
Oh, okay.
This is
Yeah,
where-
I'll let you know if I take a look. It could be. There's lots of ways to use it. Just another way.
I know. I have to follow
Yeah.
the rules and different where they go.
Because like some of them, yeah.
It's like,
Here.
I
Don't use my laptop. Let's see.
And,
what if I like just hold near them?
no, there's no
Here.
Right here.
That's good.
Yeah.
Use my phone.
Because of how good that.
Yeah. We're gonna do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
Yep. I think you can take, because I don't even use, like I use some Dropbox and that kind of stuff, which looks like just an additional folder. It appears to be just an extension of this, but I haven't used iCloud. I don't know what the interface is like. I know, is it hard? It's really hard. Sometimes when you're sitting on a cold night, if you ever need to warm up, just fire up Unity. It runs hot. It runs really hot. Jason, drink more water. I'm worried that you've been talking all day. Are you chronically? I wake up in the morning now and I just try to do like 3 glasses of water before I do anything. I'm like, okay, now I can have a pot of coffee. Look, it took me till I was like almost 55 years old to do it. I always wanted to, and I just never did. And then I was like, okay, now or never. When its light lit up like this, I know something's going.
Storage. What do I have?
So are you guys okay to meet here again next week? Is this an okay?
I'll be.
Oh, you're
You know what?
gone?
I'm gonna stop here on my way from the airport, even though I'll miss half of it, but I'm.
Oh, just come, yeah. And Jason, is it okay if I upload that video?
Oh yeah, did you stop it?
You know what? I didn't. I closed everything and I didn't stop, but I wonder if I just stopped by closing.